she's mocking the Queen's Guard in front of flashing cameras. That's what onlookers whispered as Celia Hawthorne, a striking tech CEO in her late 30s with a sharp jawline, flawless skin, and commanding presence, stepped out of her sleek Rolls-Royce. Dressed in heels and a coat worth more than most people's rent, she moved like royalty, but with none of the restraint. Her eyes locked on the royal guard stationed near the entrance, unmoving, expressionless. A smirk crept across her glossy red lips. "Does he even breathe?" she scoffed. "Or is he just for decoration?" Laughter followed. Her voice, rich with condescension, cut through the air as she waved her hand mockingly near his face. "Come on, do something useful." The crowd watched, some amused, others quietly uncomfortable. The assistant by her side pretended not to hear, but the guard remained perfectly still, stoic, composed, completely unaffected. His stillness unsettled her more than a response ever could. She rolled her eyes and turned to walk away, and that's when it happened. His hand shifted, just slightly. A flicker of motion so subtle yet deliberate that it made every head snap toward him. The street went silent. The cameras stopped clicking. And for the first time in a long time, Celia Hawthorne didn't know what to say. But before we reveal what he did next, and why the entire crowd would never forget it, hit that subscribe button and let us know where you're watching from. Now, let's get into it. Celia Hawthorne, 38, wasn't just powerful, she was unshakable. A self-made tech mogul with the kind of boardroom dominance that made headlines. She commanded billion-dollar deals and global attention with the same cool efficiency. Her rise wasn't cushioned by legacy or luck. At 18, her father emptied their family accounts and vanished, leaving her with debt, disgrace, and a name she had to rebuild from scratch. That betrayal forged something fierce in her. From that day on, she made a vow. No man would ever have power over her again. Now, she owned more than companies, she owned the room. Every space she entered shifted around her presence. Assistants rushed, competitors watched their words, and even politicians softened their tone when she spoke. Control wasn't her preference, it was her armor. But that morning, something unexpected broke the rhythm. As she stepped out of her car for her exclusive charity gala, her sharp eyes caught sight of a royal guard stationed near the entrance. Still, unyielding, unbothered. Unlike everyone else, he didn't move. Not for her, not even a blink. Sergeant Elliot Ward, 36, was no stranger to intensity. A veteran of elite protection units, he'd once taken a bullet during a surprise security breach and returned to duty within weeks. He wasn't in the business of recognition. He was in the business of quiet strength. That morning, he'd been reassigned for ceremonial duty, a minor appearance, a routine display. He had no idea he was about to become the only man in years to challenge Celia Hawthorne's illusion of control, simply by standing still. Outside the polished marble steps of the gala venue, Celia Hawthorne turned heads as always. Cameras flashed. Her heels echoed like declarations of dominance. But just before reaching the doors, her eyes landed on the same man she'd mocked earlier, the royal guard. Still there, still unmoved, still silent. A grin tugged at the edge of her perfect lips. "Look who's still playing statue," she quipped to her assistant, her voice loud enough to be heard. "Who's he protecting?" "My hairstyle." She slowed her pace, deliberately circling him like a lioness amused by her prey. With every step she tilted her head, mock-studying him. "Do they train you in stonework or just tell you to shut up and stand pretty?" Her manicured fingers hovered near his face, not quite touching. The crowd around them shifted. Some laughed uncomfortably. Others pulled out their phones, eager to catch the moment the unshakable CEO challenged royalty, literally. But Elliot didn't budge. His jaw remained locked, his spine perfectly aligned, eyes fixed straight ahead. A fortress in human form. His stillness made her louder. "You're just a prop in a fancy hat," she scoffed, the amusement in her tone now tinged with frustration. "All this ceremony, what does it even do?" Nearby, a young boy broke from his mother's grasp and saluted the guard with innocent reverence. Elliot didn't respond, not even a flicker, but the boy beamed proudly anyway. Just then, a passing tourist, elderly and soft-spoken, whispered to her companion, "He deserves better than this circus." Celia rolled her eyes, tossing her hair back with theatrical disdain. But what she didn't see, what she couldn't see, was that someone across the street had started recording. A journalist, attending the gala to cover high society donors, had caught the entire scene. And while Celia saw only a man in uniform, the lens captured something else entirely. A servant of the crown, enduring mockery without a single word, anchored by duty, untouched by ego. Because sometimes the loudest answer is no answer at all. Inside the glittering halls of the gala, as music floated and glasses clinked, Celia sat with her usual air of detached superiority. She barely looked up as her assistant approached, tense, hesitant, and holding a sealed note. "A message, ma'am," the assistant whispered, carefully sliding the envelope across. Celia opened it, eyebrows lifting as she read the contents. A brief and formal reminder from the Office of Royal Protocol that mocking active service members, including ceremonial royal guards, violated expected decorum. Her laughter rang out across the marble room. "Are they serious? I can't tease a lawn ornament now," she smirked, crumpling the note without a second thought. Let them stand in the rain for hours and see if humor doesn't help. The assistant said nothing, clearly uneasy, but Celia had already dismissed the moment as nonsense. Later that evening, as Celia exited the venue to a wave of camera flashes, she strode toward her waiting Rolls-Royce. Elliot Ward still stood silently at his post near the entrance, unmoving and unreadable. She approached again, as if daring him to react. This time she crossed the line. With a flick of her fingers, she tapped a medal on his chest and leaned in, whispering with a sneer, "Plastic pride." For 3 long years, Elliot had never reacted. Not once. But now, his head turned. Just slightly, but enough for their eyes to meet. His voice was low, composed, firm. "Ma'am, please respect the uniform." And everything stopped. The staff froze. The photographers fell silent. Even Celia's assistant went still. In that one calm moment, her smirk faltered. For the first time in years, someone hadn't played along. The gasp that followed was almost theatrical, sharp, collective, stunned. For years, tourists had passed by royal guards without so much as a blink in return. But tonight, one had spoken, and the world had caught it. Phones shot up instantly. A dozen camera lenses zoomed in on the man who had just broken centuries of silent protocol with 5 precise words. Celia froze, blinking rapidly as though the ground beneath her had shifted. Her designer heels didn't feel so steady anymore. For the first time in recent memory, her control slipped, just for a second, but enough for everyone to notice. Her eyes darted across the crowd, looking for validation, for mockery to continue, but none came. A child clapped, small, innocent, sincere. Nearby, a few people nodded toward Elliot with quiet respect. One older gentleman even removed his cap. Suddenly, the moment no longer revolved around Celia Hawthorne's presence, power, or prestige. It had shifted completely, to the silent dignity she had tried to mock. She took a step back, her voice low and shaken. "Unbelievable," she muttered under her breath and turned sharply on her heel, storming off toward her car. But the damage, or perhaps the reckoning, had already begun. By nightfall, the video made its way across social media. "Royal Guard Speaks," Silence's CEO read the first headline. Hashtags exploded. "Respect," the uniform. "Silent Power," "Royal Reckoning." Millions watched the clip not for gossip, but for grace. And without knowing it, Celia had become the face of arrogance undone, while Elliot stood as the symbol of dignity that doesn't need to raise its voice. Inside the quiet confines of his barracks, Elliot sat on the edge of his neatly made bunk, eyes fixed on the glowing screen of his phone. The video played on mute. He didn't need the sound, the image of himself turning, the simple 5-word sentence, the stunned face of Celia Hawthorne. It was etched in his mind now. Outside, the world was reacting. Inside, Elliot remained still, composed, but not untouched. His thoughts drifted backward, decades, really, to the sound of his father's voice. A tall man, regal even off duty, who had once said to young Elliot, "Stillness protects more than bullets." At the time, he hadn't fully understood it. Now he lived it. Years ago, early in Elliot's service, his mother had passed. He was on post when he received the message. Not once did he flinch. Not when he read the text. Not when he felt his lungs tighten. Not when tears threatened behind expressionless eyes. He completed his shift. Only after the final rotation did he go to the hospital. It was never about coldness. It was discipline, purpose, a quiet honoring of something larger than himself. That silence had shaped every part of him. He didn't speak to prove points. He didn't move to gain approval, and he certainly didn't break posture for provocation until today. And even then, it wasn't rage or ego that moved him. It was principle, the weight of generations behind the uniform. The disrespect didn't strike him personally. It struck what he stood for. So tonight, as the world made noise around him, Elliot sat still. Phone muted, lights low, hands clasped. Not proud, not shaken, just certain. Celia Hawthorne sat in the dim light of her penthouse, barefoot and unusually still. The hum of the city filtered through the windows, but her attention was fixed on the large screen in front of her. She had played the video again, and again. The viral clip that had consumed her entire day now played at half volume, her own voice echoing faintly through the room. She watched herself in high definition, stepping from the car, smirking, mocking, flicking a medal on the Royal Guard's chest. Then came the moment that had silenced the world. His head turned, just slightly, and 5 calm, deliberate words left his mouth. "Ma'am, please respect the uniform." She paused the video, rewound, watched it again. And this time she didn't focus on herself. She focused on him. On the way, he never flinched even as a child nearby saluted. On the weight behind his stillness. Her phone vibrated on the coffee table. Messages from PR, headlines piling up, a drafted apology waiting for approval. But Celia didn't move. Instead, she crossed the room to a drawer she hadn't opened in years. Inside was a single worn photograph. Her brother, Jack, in his marine blues, smiling with that familiar spark. He had been her anchor once, before war took him and left her chasing power in its place. She remembered the way he used to calm her storms with quiet strength. "Silence isn't surrender," he had said once. "Sometimes it's the last line of defense." She'd laughed at him then, called him too noble for this world. But now, Watching that guard take a stand without raising a hand, without raising his voice, she saw Jack again, not in appearance, but in essence. She played the video one final time, her gaze fixed not on herself, but on the moment the child saluted, the ripple of stillness in the crowd, and the single man who didn't need to shout to command respect. Her expression softened, her shoulders dropped, and in a voice barely above a whisper she said, "He would have stood like that too." No tears fell, but something deeper cracked inside, the part of her that had armored itself with sarcasm and success. Now, in the face of quiet honor, that armor finally began to give way. 2 days later, the sharp heels, designer sunglasses, and crowd-commanding arrogance were gone. Celia Hawthorne stood quietly by the palace gates, her posture reserved, her gaze thoughtful. There were no paparazzi this time, no PR team nearby, no assistant trailing behind her. Just her. For once, she had chosen to be unseen. As the ceremonial guard shift ended and the soldiers filed out one by one, she recognized him instantly. Elliot Ward, the same stoic figure she had belittled in front of dozens just days earlier. Now, without the uniform, he looked no less composed, no less dignified. She waited until he passed through the outer gate, then stepped forward slowly. Her voice, usually commanding, barely rose above the street noise. "I mocked something I didn't understand," she said, her eyes cast downward, hands clasped in front of her. There was no defensiveness in her tone, only clarity and a hint of shame. Elliot paused. He didn't respond right away, didn't offer her an easy out with a joke or a nod. He simply looked at her. The silence between them stretched for a few seconds. Then finally, he said, "You do now." That was it. No lecture, no judgment. Just a line of truth she'd earned by showing up without the walls. Celia's breath hitched. She reached into her coat and pulled out a folded envelope. "It's for the wounded guardsman's trust," she said softly. Not because of guilt, because of respect. Elliot accepted it without a smile, without ceremony, but his eyes acknowledged the gesture. It was a small moment, but for both of them, it was enough. In the weeks that followed, Celia didn't return to the palace gates. She didn't speak to the press, didn't release a public apology, and didn't try to reframe the viral moment. Instead, she channeled her energy into something quieter and far more meaningful. Behind closed doors, she launched a mental health initiative in honor of her late brother, a Marine who had struggled in silence after returning from service. The program offered therapy, reintegration support, and emergency housing for veterans, without speeches or cameras. It wasn't about redemption. It was about correction. She never mentioned Elliot by name, not once, but every month, without fail, a bouquet of white lilies appeared near his post, always left during the early hours before the palace opened. The flowers came with a simple card tucked discreetly between the stems. The message never changed, for those who never moved, but always stood. Elliot never asked where they came from. He didn't need to. He recognized the silence behind the gesture, the kind that didn't seek credit, just peace. One of those cards now lived inside his locker, pressed between pages of a field manual, unread by anyone else. It wasn't a headline, it wasn't loud, but it was legacy, rewritten without ever raising a voice. Tourists still line up at the gates every morning, cameras in hand, ready to snap photos of the Royal Guard. Children wave eagerly, some laugh, others mimic the Guard's stoic stance for fun. But once in a while, someone doesn't take out their phone. They don't wave, don't laugh. They just pause. They linger a little longer than the rest. Maybe their eyes search the face beneath the bearskin hat. Maybe they recognize something familiar in the stillness. They don't need a show. They're not here for the performance. They're here because silence, true silence, spoke to them once. And they haven't forgotten how it felt. The camera never caught Celia's final visit. It didn't need to. The most important moments are the ones that don't ask to be seen. And the guard, he still stands, unmoved, unshaken. Not because he's emotionless, but because his stillness holds weight. Because some lessons don't require sound to echo. They only need time, and someone willing to listen. Have you ever realized, too late, that you disrespected something sacred, only to be humbled by its unshakable strength? Would you have laughed like Celia, or listened the way she eventually did? Let us know in the comments. And if you believe honor doesn't need to raise its voice to be heard, share this story. We'll see you tomorrow with another Royal Guard story that proves silence can be louder than anything.